The Hokies finally have their new guy at the helm. James Franklin is officially the head coach at Virginia Tech. And this is one of those hires, the more you think about it, the crazier it gets. Like, imagine someone told you last December, James Franklin, who was coaching in the college football playoff semifinals, 11 months later, he'd be the head coach at Virginia Tech. Nobody would believe you, not one person. But here we are, and honestly, there's a lot to unpack. The good, the bad, and all the crazy stuff in between. We have our first coaching hire of the offseason. So let's talk about it. Here's the thing that people got to realize. James Franklin to Virginia Tech doesn't even sound real at first. He has 128 career wins, a 68% winning percentage in 14 seasons, 104 wins at Penn State, which is the second most of all time in school history. And again, he was coaching in the semifinals last season. And that Notre Dame game was close. It's not like he got his ass kicked by Notre Dame. He was right there at the end of the game. Those coaches don't fall into your lap, especially programs like Virginia Tech. And I get it. Virginia Tech historically is one of the better programs. They're not like the LSU's, the Ohio States, the Notre Dames. Virginia Tech is a second or third tier school, even in the history of college football, but especially recently. They don't get top tier coaches. And I get Franklin has had problems beating the top teams, beating the top 10 ranked teams, winning big games, but he is still clearly a culture builder, a program builder. So let's talk about the upside that Virginia Tech is getting here, because there is a lot there. James Franklin immediately makes Virginia Tech relevant again. You can kind of feel it. Before Franklin, Virginia Tech, the past 10 years, has just been kind of there. Great fan base, great atmosphere, cool traditions, but not really in the national conversation they were like in the early 2000s, the 1990s. But the second Franklin's name got attached to the job, they're everywhere again. They're being talked about in podcasts, TV shows, social media, YouTube, all blowing up about Virginia Tech. And that's the point. You hire Franklin, you are in the news immediately, instantly. I think the biggest bump, though, that Virginia Tech is going to get is recruiting. Franklin took a Penn State team that obviously Penn State historically is a very great program, that were coming off of the worst period in school history though, and they got them recruiting at a top 20 to top 10 school immediately. And here's the thing, Franklin already recruits the exact region Virginia Tech needs. He dominated the DMV area of Virginia, Maryland, and DC. He was great in Pennsylvania, obviously, New Jersey, the whole New England area. He's built great relationships in those areas for a decade. Plus, there were 17 Penn State decommits after he's been fired. So that's 17 legit, very good recruits that are just floating out there that could be committed to Virginia Tech because of Franklin. Even if you just get 3 to 5 of those guys, if you're a Virginia Tech fan, you're licking your chops, because those are the kind of guys that can flip a team around in 1 year. We've seen it already in the NIL and transfer era. Teams can go from nothing to great in 1 year with the right coaching and the right roster building. And with what the Virginia Tech administration is saying with the money, the biggest difference between old Virginia Tech and this new version of Virginia Tech is going to be investing, like actually investing. The school approved roughly $229 million in athletic spending over 4 years. That's not a market slogan. That's real money for staff, recruiting, support personnel, facilities, NIL deals, the transfer portal. There's real money going to this program. And now if you're James Franklin, a guy who knows exactly what it takes to win, that's the signal you needed. So you have your money, you have your school, like your history of the school, and now you have your coach, James Franklin, to build the roster and build the new culture. And that's what it kind of takes to win in college football nowadays. Franklin's biggest strength isn't actually play calling or scheme. It's the CEO side of being a head coach. He builds structures, hires strong staffs, he organizes programs, he recruits consistently, he gets everyone rowing in the same direction. Virginia Tech has desperately needed that since Frank Beamer retired. And if you were trying to find the new Frank Beamer, it's kind of exactly what Franklin's strengths are. All right, now let's talk about the concerns though, because pretending there aren't any would be lying. The game management part of it, we've all seen it. This is the big elephant in the room. If there's one thing Franklin gets roasted for, it's the in-game decision stuff, the timeouts, late game choices, fourth down calls, situational moments. There were times at Penn State where the whole fan base aged 10 years in the fourth quarter alone. Can it improve? Sure, coaches do evolve, but that's the one concern if you are Virginia Tech is how will the game management be? The other big thing is 4-21 versus top 10 teams. That's real and it really does matter. Now you can't argue, listen, he couldn't beat Ohio State. He couldn't beat Michigan. He couldn't beat Oregon. Almost no one beat those teams. Like those teams are three of the best programs we have in college football since he's gotten to Penn State. But still, that number is the number. Now, if you're Virginia Tech, I get that's worrisome, but you're not hiring Franklin just to win a national championship now. You're hiring Franklin to get you back to relevancy. For the longest time, you haven't been a ACC contender, let alone a college football playoff contender. So bringing in Franklin at least gets you back into conference championship range. And there's no one in the ACC who's a top team like the Big Ten has. Clemson has fallen off. Miami is good, but they're not Ohio State, Oregon level. Louisville, Duke, UVA, like these teams aren't even close to the Ohio State, Oregon, or Michigans of the past 10 years. So the top 10 record is worrisome, but it's not nearly as big of a deal as the culture building, the recruiting, in bringing. Virginia Tech also has to stay financially committed. Yes, they said they have the $200+ million over the 4 years, but this hiring only works long term if they keep that up. Franklin didn't come to Virginia Tech expecting miracles. He came because he saw the money being spent, the resources, and the real support. If that slows down, the NILs dip, the staff budget gets tight, if the school says, hey, we spent enough, Franklin, listen, there are more jobs out there better than Virginia Tech in the years to come. He will have no problem leaving to go to a better school if Virginia Tech doesn't support him. So if you want that 10 to 15 year commitment like he just gave Penn State, you have to keep supporting him. But why did James Franklin pick Virginia Tech? It's because, listen, James Franklin, he could have sat out a year. He could have waited for more top tier jobs. He had options, but he chose Blacksburg. He believes he can win in the ACC. Clemson's building. Florida State has been up and down drastically. Like I said, Miami, good, but not Ohio State level. There is no juggernaut he has to climb over. The league is absolutely winnable. And his former defensive coordinator was Brent Pry, who coached at Virginia Tech. They just fired. So you have to believe that they were talking. He has to believe that Brent Pry told him, yes, there are some risks, that Virginia Tech has some dysfunction behind the scenes, but Franklin wouldn't have chose Virginia Tech if he didn't see the upside and he didn't see the new commitments. His first public comments actually say a lot. He said, I'm honored and humbled to join the Hokie family. My vision is simple: to restore unmatched excellence, to build something that lasts, and to serve this university, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and our amazing fan base with honor, integrity, and passion. That doesn't sound like a guy who came here to rent a house for 2 years just to build his resume up. His resume was already as good as it could be, but that sounds like someone who's ready to plant a flag. And if you zoom out, this doesn't just affect Virginia Tech. This affects the entire ACC. When Virginia Tech is good, and I mean like genuinely good, the conference is way more interesting. Lane Stadium becomes must watch. The rivalries become meaningful again. TV networks care more. The recruiting battles get more competitive. If you're UVA, if you're any of the North Carolina teams, Clemson, or even some of the teams in the Big Ten, Virginia is packed with elite recruits. And now, like Virginia Tech kind of lost its grip on Virginia, but with Franklin coming to Virginia Tech, this state of Virginia and the Maryland and DC area, all of a sudden they get a lot more competitive getting those recruits. So if you're other ACC or Big Ten SEC schools that were dipping into Virginia, you're worried. Franklin makes Virginia Tech relevant the second he walks into the building. Whether they're competing for the ACC next year or not, they are more of a threat. In that conference that desperately needs more reliable brands, this is a huge deal for the ACC. If you look at them this year, they've been struggling. There's even talks about 2 Group of 5 teams making in the playoffs before the ACC. Won't happen, but there were, conversations about it. The ACC has to love this because Virginia Tech needs to be that big brand for the ACC, and it's good for football in general. Here's the final thought on James Franklin. It is a bold hire, but it's the right kind of bold. It's not reckless, it's not desperate, it's not a shot in the dark. It's a calculated swing at a coach who he wins, he recruits, he builds, and he stabilizes. You got to realize James Franklin came to Penn State 2 years after the Sandusky incident. He came to a Penn State team that was desperate to rebrand and get their name out of the gutter. And made them into a team that, yes, again, they couldn't beat the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Oregons, but they became a 10-win team consistently. Is James Franklin perfect? No. But name me the perfect coach Virginia Tech could have hired. Go ahead, I'll wait. This is the exactly type of fit Virginia Tech has needed since Frank Beamer. And this might be the most important hire in school history. As long as the school keeps investing, as long as the NIL stays strong, and as long as everyone is going in the same direction, Virginia Tech might actually be back on the national radar sooner than anyone thinks.